was probably different than what you are used to hearing on a solo. And maybe it was even slightly awkward. But you certainly did pay attention, I would imagine. And you couldn't really predict what I was going to do, which is kind of a good thing if you want people to listen to you. So this pretty much demonstrates the very simple concept of what I'm talking about is so great about this one idea in soloing, and that is the concept of resting and taking a break. You know, yes, it could feel awkward to do, but when we are able to learn how to sit in that silence comfortably, it's very, very powerful. It doesn't have to be these long pauses that I did necessarily, and we'll get into that a little more. But I just wanted to illustrate and kind of get your attention right from the beginning. You know, having silence and having breaks has a lot of benefits. One is that we're able to think about what we just played and plan and think about what we'll play next. Additionally, it allows for space for the other musicians to react or sort of interject into the conversation. It gives the listeners and ourselves time to process what we just played. And also, most importantly, it gives us time to listen to what is going on around us. So these things all together are not only going to help you to have a better experience, but the listener to have a better experience too. It's very common for us when we are starting out that we have a sort of sense of meandering or like run-on sentences when we solo. We're either afraid of that empty space that we're talking about, or we're not sure what to play, or we're trying to keep our place in the song, or some combination of all three. So breaking down those elements, let's take a closer look today at just the one thing, sitting in that comfortable silence and working on playing and resting, or we could also call it pacing. So let's take a closer look today at the aspect of resting and leaving space in our solos. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rubicki. You know what to do. Like, subscribe, look for the PDF below. Today we're talking about play and rest, the concept of taking breaks, leaving space, and how powerful that can be in soloing. So when we're talking about playing and resting, it doesn't necessarily mean that one needs to completely fill up one bar with like continuous 8 notes and then stop right on the downbeat of bar 2. Ideally, we're looking for natural, logical phrases, and they could be long, but in the instance of the exercise we'll talk about, they should be relatively short. However, try to make them something that sounds good to you and that matches the chords and is sort of digestible, right? Like one little statement. You know, there's also a great power, and it goes to the effect of the whole idea here, to really holding back, resisting the urge to play. You know you can play, right? You're sitting there, you're aware that you can play, but you are waiting to do so until it's the right time. And when it's the right time, you want to play with a lot of conviction. You really want to just release that moment into the phrase that you're going to play. During the resting periods, listen for sort of the echo of what you played and be listening for what other people are doing too, because it might spur you to do something else. But that said, it's very, very important that you have some of this exercise or some of this practice be involved with other music and ideally other live musicians. So you really want to be able to practice that aspect of listening that is so important in this. So I've got some play-alongs here that I'm using that were recorded with Ulysses Owens on drums and Oscar Perez on piano. And there are sometimes quite short, but my idea here is just to illustrate some of the ideas that we're talking about. When we are directly talking about laying out a plan of playing and resting, it's easier when the phrases in total, meaning the play and the rest, equals some kind of even number of measures. 2, 4, 6 to some degree, 8, and so on. It's a little bit harder when you sort of have an odd number of bars that the total comes to. So if you play for 2 bars and then rest for 3 and then play for 2 again, you're sort of starting phrases in unexpected places, but that's a good thing. That's kind of what we want to aim towards. But at the very beginning, especially if you're sort of right at the beginning of your journey of improvising, it helps a lot to lay out a very specific game plan of where you're going to play and where you're going to rest. Of course, choose a song that you know well, ideally. And the very first and most basic thing would be to play for one measure and then rest for one measure. Play for one, rest for one, and so on. Again, it doesn't have to fit exactly into that one measure, and it doesn't have to start on the downbeat. In fact, it would be great if it doesn't. And it's okay if it goes into the second bar a little bit. The idea is that you are really forcing yourself to control when you are playing, and that will lead to a lot of great discoveries. So let's take a listen to this concept of one bar of playing and one bar of resting with a D minor blues that Ulysses and Oscar are playing. And it's very short, so let's take a listen. So that's one example of the basic 1 and 1, play and rest. Now, what if, for example, we reversed it? What if we rested first and then played 1? So rest 1, play 1. Let's take a listen again on this D minor blues. So that kind of gives a different vibe, doesn't it? And now let's sort of jump into some of the examples that I'll put in the PDF of a little bit different of play and rest. So let's total 6 bars, okay? So I'm gonna play for 4 and then rest for 2 and then play for 4 again. So remember, on a blues form, we've got 12 measures. So we're gonna cover the entirety of one chorus, but as things circle around even within the chorus, you aren't starting at the beginning of a 4-bar phrase. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Let's check it out. And you can certainly push this to the extreme if you want. it starts to sound a little unmusical to us, and that makes sense when you're leaving sort of partially predictable or very predictable play and rest. And also it just sort of doesn't lead to what feels naturally like natural phrases and stops and starts that would happen in music that we want to hear. So it's going to sound a little bit sort of stilted when you're working on it. But that's okay, because like some of the other videos we talked about, this is partially, if not all, an ear-mind thing. To be able to keep your place is very, very helpful. But more importantly, just to control what our hands are doing is so fundamental to playing what we want to play and hearing what we want to hear out of our instrument. So that said, I'm going to now play some courses of a ballad, and let's just take a listen to what it means to wait before we come in. I will purposefully not only give a lot of time, but also consciously in my mind delay when I expect to come in or when I want to come in. This also isn't very long, so I'll try to fit it in into a short amount of time. Did you get a sense of sort of being on the edge of your seat there? I hope so. Not that you're necessarily dying to hear what I have to play in a solo, but the effect, I think, is there. That sense of control over ourselves allows for the listener to, as I say, relax, and also at the same time want to hear what's happening, because you don't know what's going to happen next. And that's part of the fun of listening. There's also the idea that you could expand it even more and sort of think in big sections. So in other words, if it's a fast tune with a short form, you could think that you're going to leave a lot of space one chorus and then not leave a lot of space the next chorus. Or if it's a longer form, 32 bars or so on, you could split the chorus in half. The first two A's, if it's A, B, A, the first two A's you might play with space, the B and the last A you might not, and so on and so forth. The idea is to provide variation and interest for the listener. So let's do a B-flat blues, and what I'm going to do is try to leave space in one chorus and then not leave as much space in the next, and sort of ping-pong between those two ideas. And so lastly, what I want to do is use this play along of the song Till There Was You. And what I really want to be able to do in my head is to be listening to exactly what Oscar and Ulysses are playing. And not only that, I really want to feel that I am choosing notes, if I can, that are not only the intended notes I want to play, but are pretty. So pretty choices in the chords that are going by. So I'm listening, I'm leaving space to listen, and I'm also thinking about playing pretty chords in those empty spaces. Let's see if I can do it. I hope that these simple examples of a really big concept were helpful to you and might help you to be able to sort of revise what you're doing and again sit in that comfort of being in silence. You know, sort of as a closing thought, I have found that as I pushed myself in speaking in front of groups and in performing and improvising, I still have my little, peccadillo is the wrong word, I still have my little things that I don't like, my little idiosyncrasies when I play. But when I am in my best place, sort of mentally and with the music, I can sit there sometimes to some of these degrees of the silence when the moment is right. And I feel a lot of sort of strength in that. I've actually developed a sense of getting strength from that silence, which I hope that you can find too. And when you're able to find a comfortable place in being in silence, which I'm not usually one to do, you have a sense of calm and a sense of command that is pleasant for everyone. And it also gives you a sense of peace when you're playing too. And you know, I find that this translates into all aspects of my life. When I have to teach in front of a group, I'm more comfortable. When I have to improvise a sort of speaking thing, whether it's a class or if I have to make some kind of speech in some kind of situation, the result of having done this work is that when I'm in those times and places, I don't feel as anxious and I don't feel as sort of reaching for something because I'm comfortable being in myself and being in the moment and being in that silence. I hope that all this was helpful for you today as always. And as always too, like, subscribe, look for the PDF. Remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.